You told yourself it was just desire, just a craving, just biology doing what biology does. But if that were true, why do you keep feeling emptier afterward? Why does the silence after hit harder than the moment itself? There's that brief pause when it's over and you just lie there, still, not satisfied, not powerful, not even relieved, just quiet, like something was taken from you and you can't explain what it was. She's right there beside you, but you feel like you're nowhere near yourself. You smile, you nod, you pretend, but underneath there's this ache, like you traded something sacred and got nothing back. You thought you were chasing pleasure, but what if that wasn't true? What if what you call lust is actually something else, something older, something much deeper? Carl Jung never saw sex as just physical. He saw it as a portal, a ritual exchange between your ego and the parts of you you've buried. Every time you touch someone, you're not just touching skin. You're revealing your shadow. Because real desire doesn't come from the body alone. It comes from everything the body has been trained to hide. Your shame, your fear of rejection, your hunger to be chosen without having to perform for it. But no one teaches you this. No one tells you that every intimate act is also an exchange of the unseen. And when you give yourself away without even realizing it, it doesn't feel like connection. It feels like collapse. This isn't only about sex. It's about what you've been offering without knowing, and why it keeps leaving you hollow. Jung tried to warn us, but his warning was too uncomfortable for most people to hear. And now you've heard it. You can't unhear it. By the end of this, you'll understand why so many men are starving, even while they touch everything they thought they wanted. This isn't just desire. It's the shadow in disguise. You think you want her body, but what you're really starving for is yourself. The moment you feel that magnetic pull, when you see her eyes, the shape of her body, the way she looks at you like maybe you could be enough, it hits something deeper than attraction. It brushes against a hunger you've almost forgotten. Not just to be with her, but to finally feel chosen. Most men don't really chase sex. They chase the feeling that they matter. And sex, or what we've been taught to call sex, is just the costume that craving wears. You see her and think, I want her. But under that, what you're really saying is, I want to be wanted. That's not lust. That's a wound dressed up as desire. Jung believed that what we call love or attraction is often our mind projecting its deepest unmet needs onto another person. You're not really seeing her. You're seeing the part of you that was never held, never affirmed, never told. You're already enough. So you project not just longing, but the emotional child still inside you. The one who believes that if he just performs the right way, she'll finally love him. But she's not the answer. She's just the screen your unconscious is using to replay the same ache again and again. That's how the cycle starts. You begin to perform. You dress the part. Say the right things. Feed her ego. Not because you're manipulative, but because you're terrified of not being chosen again. You hide your emptiness with confidence. You hide your fear of being invisible with charm. You call it chemistry, but it's not. It's coping. It's pain dressed as seduction. No one teaches this because no one wants to admit it. That so much of male desire, especially when it's obsessive, intense, or unrelenting, isn't really about passion. It's about proving worth. And here's the worst part. Even if you get her, the emptiness comes back. Because it was never about her in the first place. It was always about that hole inside you, the one no body can fill. Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's exactly what's happening here. You're not addicted to women. You're addicted to the illusion that one of them will heal what your childhood broke. But they can't. And the sooner you see that, the sooner you stop begging to be chosen and start reclaiming the part of yourself you abandoned just to feel wanted. This isn't about guilt. It's about waking up. Your desire isn't wrong. It's just been hijacked. Not by her, but by the parts of you still crying in silence. And if you never face those parts, you'll keep calling it attraction when really it's the hunger to come home to yourself. Sometimes she smiles at you and you feel something shift. Not in your body, but in your soul. It feels electric, ancient, almost sacred. You don't just want her. You feel like you need her. Not for sex, but for something much deeper. For meaning. for peace, for wholeness. But you can't explain why. Jung could. He called it the anima, the hidden feminine inside every man. Not a fantasy, not a preference, but a blueprint etched into your unconscious from the moment you were born. It holds all the parts of you the world told you to reject if you wanted to be seen as a man. Your softness, your tenderness, your emotion. So where does that softness go? It gets buried. And later in life it gets projected onto her. Not the real her, but the image your soul paints over her body. You don't fall in love with her. You fall in love with your own forgotten sensitivity, disguised as her eyes, her voice, her warmth. And that's where the trap is. Because now you're not just attracted. You're enchanted. She becomes the answer, the medicine, the rescue. But how could she possibly carry all that? You've turned her into a goddess, not a person. Projection. And when she fails to live up to that myth, you feel betrayed. That's how emotional dependency starts. Not out of love, but out of an unconscious attempt to reclaim your inner feminine by using her as a shortcut. You think if she stays, you'll be whole. If she loves you, you'll finally be enough. But this was never about her. You've mistaken reflection for reality. And every time you project your inner world onto a woman's face, you're not really seeing her. You're seeing what you lost in yourself. And that illusion will always collapse, because she can't be the home you've never built within. Jung warned that the man who does not confront his own inner feminine will project her endlessly and suffer for it every time. Until you reclaim her, the sensitivity and softness you exiled, you'll keep turning women into salvation and then resenting them for not saving you. This isn't just heartbreak. The self-abandonment disguised as love. You thought you were entering her body, but really you were handing over your soul. No one tells you that sex, real sex, isn't just biology. It's a ritual, a doorway between the seen and unseen. And every time you walk through that doorway without awareness, without presence, without discernment, you leave more of yourself behind. It's not just skin against skin. It's shadows entangling. It's unresolved wounds fusing in silence. It's pain from the past slipping quietly between two people who think they're just chasing pleasure. Jung believed the body is not just a machine. It's an oracle, a stage where the unconscious reveals its deepest truths. And sex, more than almost anything else, is the most honest performance of all. You can fake a smile. You can fake interest. You can fake love. But your body never lies. It shows everything you've been trying to keep hidden. Every suppressed fear, every unspoken longing, every wound you haven't dared to name. When you enter a woman unconsciously, you're not leading. You're escaping. You're asking her, without saying it, to fill the silence you can't face on your own. The cost of that isn't obvious at first, but it's there. You start to lose clarity. You feel drained, directionless, like there's a fog that's settled into your mind, and you can't figure out where it came from. That heaviness doesn't come from the act itself. It comes from the exchange. Because sex is never neutral. It's always a transfer of memory, of emotion, of energy. If she's carrying chaos, confusion, or unhealed trauma, and you merge with that without awareness, you absorb it. And suddenly you're exhausted, but you can't explain why. This is what happens when we treat the sacred as casual. We call it hookup culture, but really it's ritual desecration. Not because of some moral rulebook, but because of energy. You're handing over the most essential part of your masculine self, and you don't even know it's happening. And the more you do it, the harder it becomes to know what's actually yours and what you've picked up from others. The sharpness of your thinking fades. Your purpose weakens. You stop feeling like a man and start feeling like a mask stretched over skin. Because every unconscious sexual act isn't just an experience. It's a trade. And if you don't understand what you're trading, you'll keep giving yourself away until one day you don't even recognize who's left. This isn't about guilt. It's about reverence. It's about remembering that not everybody deserves access to you. You think your lust is yours, that it belongs to you alone, that it's simply your desire, your choice. But what if it isn't? What if your lust, the craving that grips you and pulls you, was never truly yours at all? What if it's just a symptom of everything you've been avoiding? Jung called this the shadow the parts of you you've repressed, rejected, or denied. And when you don't face those parts, they don't disappear. They take the wheel. They show up in your fantasies, in your compulsions, in your inability to say no to what you know will leave you empty. Desire at its most destructive is rarely about pleasure. It's about pain wearing a mask. The ache to prove yourself. The panic of being ignored. The quiet fear that you're unlovable unless you're impressive or strong. So you perform. You become the charming one. The deep one. The endlessly available nice guy who never offends, never disappoints, never asks for too much. You become whatever you think will make her want you, because you don't believe the real you is enough. That's not kindness. That's survival. And underneath it is shame. You don't chase her because you love her. You chase her because you're afraid of what you'll feel if she doesn't want you. You tell yourself it's desire, but really it's a distraction. A way to keep from hearing the voice inside that's been speaking since you were young, the one saying you're not enough as you are. And here's the truth that stings the most. The more you run from that voice, the more control it has over your life. Your shadow isn't evil. It's just unmet need wearing a disguise. That rush of uncontrollable lust isn't just animal instinct. It's the unspoken grief of never feeling fully accepted. That sexual craving isn't just hunger for touch. It's the ache to feel like you matter. The habit of always pleasing others isn't because you're generous. It's because you want to be loved without having to earn it. But as long as you perform, you keep betraying yourself. You become hooked on validation, hooked on the high of being wanted just long enough to avoid looking in the mirror. And every time that high fades, you start chasing again, thinking what you need is more desire, when what you really need is integration. The good guy isn't always good. Sometimes he's just lost, disconnected from who he really is, terrified to stop performing because if he did, he wouldn't know who he was anymore. Jung said, "The shadow is everything you've repressed and never faced. Until you face it, it runs your life, especially your desire." This isn't about killing desire. It's about reclaiming it. Because only when you bring your shadow into the light does desire stop being a drug and become a choice. Every time you touch someone, there's a cost. If you're unconscious, you're probably overpaying. They never taught you that intimacy has a price. Not in morality, but in energy. Not every encounter costs you your dignity, but every encounter costs something. Because sex isn't just a moment. It's a merging of timelines, memories, archetypes, shadows, unspoken stories. All of it weaves together in that single act. You're not just giving your body. You're handing over your emotional blueprint and taking on theirs. If you touch her without presence, you don't leave as the same man. You leave carrying things you can't see, but you can feel. Maybe you start feeling foggy, irritable, less connected to your purpose. You tell yourself it's nothing, but it's not nothing. It's the debt you've taken on without even knowing it. Even without words, the body speaks. It remembers her chaos, her pain, her past, the people who came before you, her fears, her attachments. They live in her nervous system, and when you enter her unconsciously, you take that on. It's like plugging into a hard drive with no protection. And your body stores that data. Jung warned that the unconscious never forgets. And in sex, it screams. Every insecurity, every heartbreak, every trace of poison flows between two people like ink through water. But we romanticize it. We call it chemistry. We call it being good in bed. We call it passion. But in truth, it's leakage. A leaking of life force, of clarity, of self-awareness. And then you wonder why you feel tired, scattered, thin in spirit. Because every unconscious encounter is a withdrawal from your bank of energy. You think it was just one night, but it wasn't. It was a ritual you didn't even know you were part of. And every ritual has an offering. The question is, what did you give and what did you take? If you don't ask that, you're not choosing your intimacy. You're just surviving it. This isn't about fear. It's about power. Because once you understand that sex is more than sensation, that it's a meeting of archetypes and memory and shadow, you stop giving yourself away like you're worthless. You start remembering that your touch is not casual. It's currency. And your soul is the one writing the check. She left. Or maybe she stayed. Either way, the silence after was the same. Not comfort, not peace, just something hollow. You lay there staring at the ceiling, and instead of feeling full, you feel faded. The room is quiet, but your mind is loud. You can't help but wonder, why do I feel worse than before? This is the collapse no one talks about. That crash after sex that doesn't come from regret, but from not getting what you thought it would give you. The emptiness isn't really about her. It never was. It's about what you were trying to take without even realizing it. The validation, the worth, the feeling that you finally mattered, the momentary escape from an ache you've been carrying for years. But no woman can give you that because it was never hers to give. When you go into the bedroom hoping to feel whole, you're already fractured. And that fracture makes every move an unspoken deal. If I give her this pleasure, maybe she'll give me myself back. But it doesn't work. Because you're not having sex with her. You're having sex with the fantasy that she can repair your self-esteem. And when she can't, because she never could, the emptiness comes back stronger. Jung believed that when we try to fix internal wounds with external solutions, we set ourselves up for suffering. Because we're not healing. We're projecting. And that's exactly what's happening here. You projected your longing to be loved without conditions onto someone who never signed up to save you. So even if she gave you her body, some part of you feels betrayed. Not because she did anything wrong, but because your soul was hoping for something she could never provide. This is the trap. Using sex to solve wounds that were never about sex in the first place. And the pattern is predictable. A temporary high, a sudden collapse, and then the cycle starts again. You begin to confuse intensity with intimacy, pleasure with connection, approval with love. But none of it lasts, because it's all built on a void. Until you see that, you'll keep offering your body in exchange for an emotional rescue that never comes. And each time you'll walk away a little more drained, a little more detached from yourself. Pleasure isn't the problem. But when you use it to avoid pain, it always takes something from you. And if you're not careful, that something is you. You were told to be strong, but no one explained what strength actually meant. So you guessed. You guessed it meant silence. You guessed it meant control. You guessed it meant always saying yes to sex, yes to power, yes to proving you're a man. And in all that guessing, you lost yourself. Now you wear the mask well. You look confident, capable, wanted. But under it, you're tired. Not just in your body, but in your soul. This is the secret pain of millions of men. The more they try to prove their masculinity, the more disconnected from it they become. Jung saw this long before we had words for it. He saw that when the masculine mind is cut off from self-awareness, it begins to decay from the inside out. You chase status. You chase sex. You chase validation. And you still feel hollow. Because real masculinity doesn't need to perform. It needs to be present. But presence is terrifying when your entire identity has been built on denial. When you've spent your whole life thinking emotions are weakness. That desire is a conquest. That value comes from being chosen, not from choosing yourself. So you perform. You memorize the lines. You play the role. You convince her and maybe even yourself that you're the man she wants. But the act drains you. Not because you're failing, but because it's not real. You're not leading. You're shifting shape. You're becoming whatever version of man the world rewards in that moment. And it costs you everything. Clarity, purpose, peace, and eventually your sense of self. The world doesn't need more men trying to look strong. It needs more men willing to be conscious. Men who don't measure themselves by how many women they can attract, but by how deeply they've met themselves. Men who've faced the shadows that power can't fix. The grief behind the grin. The fear hiding inside the pleasure. Because the collapse of masculinity doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens in the quiet choice to trade authenticity for approval. And once you've made that trade enough times, you stop leading your life. You just react to it. You become an echo. Loud on the outside, empty on the inside. But it doesn't have to end there. You can stop performing. You can start choosing. But first, you have to face the parts of yourself you're most afraid to see. Because as Jung said, what you don't make conscious will appear in your life as fate. And the longer you avoid your truth, the more your shadow will write your story while you stand there wondering why your strength is slowly killing you. You've spent years trying to earn something that was never meant to be earned. Affection, approval, masculinity itself. But what if it was never about proving anything? What if everything you thought you had to become was really just something you needed to remember? Jung didn't believe in becoming perfect. He believed in becoming whole. And wholeness doesn't come from performance. It comes from integration, from facing the parts of you you've exiled. Your shadow, your softness, your wounded hunger, even the feminine inside you, the emotions, the sensitivity, the craving to be held, not just to conquer. Here's the paradox. Real masculinity doesn't fear the feminine. It welcomes her within. And when a man does that, he stops reaching. He stops chasing. He doesn't need to prove himself anymore. He simply is. That's what presence really is. Not just stillness on the outside, but peace on the inside. No mask, no act. Just a man who's no longer afraid to be seen without armor. And this is where intimacy truly begins. Not when you impress her. Not when you perform. But when you show up as yourself fully. Quietly. Deeply. She'll feel it. That you're not touching her to get something. You're touching her because your energy is already full. Because you're not trying to extract worth from her anymore. You're expressing something that's already there. That's sacred desire. Desire that's not born from scarcity, but from sovereignty. Desire that doesn't beg. It invites. Desire that doesn't collapse. It anchors. When your lust is no longer a cry for rescue, it becomes a language of truth. Not a mask. Not a lie. But a reflection of the self you've finally decided to embrace. Jung called this process individuation. The journey back to your center, where all the parts of you belong. The strong, the soft, the sexual, the silent. And when you live from that place, you don't just have sex, you create meaning. You don't just feel pleasure, you feel union. Not only with her, but with yourself. That's the shift from performing masculinity to embodying it. From chasing intimacy to becoming the kind of presence that naturally draws it in. Because the man who no longer needs to prove anything is finally free to love without losing himself. Now you see it. Your desire was never just about pleasure. It was a map, a mirror, a message from the parts of you you've been trying not to hear. And what you do with that realization changes everything. You can pretend you never understood. You can scroll on. You can bury the insight beneath another hit of stimulation. But the truth is already in you now. You know that your desire has two paths. It can heal you or it can hollow you. It can be the prison you keep going back to, chasing women who can never give you what you won't give yourself. Or it can become the portal that leads you back to your own soul. But only if you stop giving yourself away like your energy is worthless. Only if you stop treating your body like a bargain to earn love. Only if you remember that not every woman should have access to your energy. Your presence is sacred. Your clarity is sacred. Your desire is sacred. But only when it's owned. Only when it's conscious. Because unconscious desire always consumes the one carrying it. Conscious desire, though, becomes fire. It becomes leadership. It becomes love. Jung taught that the unconscious is not evil. It's just unclaimed, unseen, unloved. And once you've seen it, you can't honestly say you didn't know. The next time you feel that pull, that ache toward another body, stop and ask yourself, am I chasing her, or am I running from myself? Because in that moment you decide. Desire will either be the chain or the key. And that choice is the start of your freedom. Maybe for the first time in your life, you realize that what you've been calling chemistry was often just coping. What you've been calling passion was sometimes performance. What you've been calling connection was really an unconscious deal you didn't know you were making. And now you can see how much energy you've been spending, not in pursuit of love, but in pursuit of proof. Proof that you're worth something. Proof that you matter. Proof that you belong. And the truth is, no matter how many times you get it, it never lasts. Because worth that comes from someone else's approval will disappear the second they stop giving it. So what happens when you stop chasing proof? First, it might feel like loss. Like you're letting go of the one thing that kept you moving. But slowly, something shifts. You start to notice that without the performance, without the constant reaching, you have more energy, more focus, more clarity about what you want, not just from a woman but from yourself. And in that space, your desire changes. It stops being a distraction from your pain and starts being a genuine expression of your wholeness. This is the place where you can actually choose who to let close. You're no longer pulled by the fear of being alone. You're no longer blinded by the hunger to be validated. You can see her clearly, not as a projection of your anima, not as a goddess to save you, but as a real person. Someone with her own wounds, her own shadows, her own history. And you can meet her from a place of fullness instead of need. That's when intimacy becomes something sacred again. Not because of some rule or tradition, but because you've made it sacred by the way you show up to it. And here's what's different now. You're not afraid of the silence anymore. You don't need her to fill it. You can lie there afterward and feel at peace, whether she stays or goes, because you're not trying to get yourself back from her anymore. You already have yourself. That's the kind of presence that changes not just your relationships, but your life. You move differently. You speak differently. You stop leaking your energy into situations that don't deserve it. You start building instead of chasing. You start leading instead of performing. Most men are never told that their desire is a compass. They think it's just an impulse, something to indulge or to suppress. But the truth is, it's pointing to the parts of you that are still unclaimed. The parts you've been trying to avoid by losing yourself in women, in status, in distraction. When you follow that compass consciously, it leads you home. When you follow it unconsciously, it leads you in circles. You can feel it even now, can't you? The pull you've been mistaking for lust is often just your own reflection calling you back. And when you answer that call, everything changes. You no longer need to be chosen to feel like you matter. You no longer need to perform to feel like a man. You are no longer chasing someone else's approval to feel alive. You are alive. You are whole. And from that place, desire is no longer a chain. It's a choice. And that choice is yours. So here you are, aware in a way you weren't before. You've seen that the game you thought you were playing was never really about her. It was always about you. About the boy inside you who still believes love has to be earned. About the man who's been performing for so long, he forgot what it feels like to stand still and simply be. And now you know that every time you called it lust, every time you called it chemistry, there was something else moving underneath. The shadow. The parts of you you didn't want to see. The grief. The shame. The quiet hunger to be chosen without having to buy your way in with charm, sex, or performance. You start to realize that this hunger has been steering you for years. It shaped your choices, your relationships, even the way you walk into a room. It's why some women could pull you in with just a glance. It wasn't magic. It was memory. Memory of something you've been missing. Something you thought you could only get through her. But it was never hers. It was always yours. And when you see that, you understand the cost of living unconsciously. You see the moments you gave yourself away too easily. The times you mistook attention for connection. The times you let someone else's presence dictate your worth. And you start to feel the weight of all the energy you've lost, all the pieces of yourself scattered in places you don't belong anymore. That's when the shift begins. Not with some grand announcement, not with a sudden change in behavior, but with a quiet decision inside you, no more. No more giving yourself away without knowing what you're offering. No more entering someone's life hoping they'll give you yourself back. No more pretending that desire without awareness is anything other than a slow leak in your soul. You start moving differently. You begin to protect your energy like it matters because now you know it does. You stop making intimacy a transaction. You start making it a choice. The truth is, the moment you stop chasing to be chosen is the moment you start living in a way that draws the right people toward you. Not because you're performing, but because your presence is steady. Your energy isn't reaching, it's rooted. And when a man is rooted, his desire becomes something rare. It's not frantic. It's not desperate. It's not tangled up in wounds he hasn't faced. It's clean. It's intentional. It's magnetic without trying to be. This is when you start to understand what Jung meant about integration. You're no longer running from your shadow. You've turned toward it. You've seen the parts you were taught to reject, and you've let them come home. The softness, the emotion, the craving to be held without having to prove anything. All of it belongs to you again. And when you live like that, you stop projecting those qualities onto women. You stop making them carry the weight of your lost self. You can meet them as they are, not as the savior you imagined. And that's where the real freedom is, because now you can desire without devouring. You can love without losing yourself. You can walk away from situations that drain you, not because you're cold, but because you're clear. You know what's yours to give, and you know who's earned the right to receive it. You stop chasing the rush of being wanted for a moment and start building the quiet power of being whole all the time. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming honest. It's about knowing when your desire is speaking from wholeness and when it's speaking from a wound. It's about making the unconscious conscious so it no longer runs your life in the shadows. And when you can do that, when you can hold your desire with awareness instead of letting it drag you into the same old patterns, everything changes. Sex stops being an escape. It becomes an extension of who you already are. And that's the point. This was never just about desire. It was never just about women. It was about you finding the parts of yourself you thought were gone, and realizing they were never lost, just waiting for you to turn around and claim them. The next time you feel that pull, that ache, that rush of attraction, you'll know the question to ask. Am I chasing her? Or am I running from myself? Because the answer will tell you everything. And in that moment, you'll decide if your desire will be the chain that keeps you bound or the key that finally sets you free.